the Financial Survival Network, helping you to survive and thrive in the new economy. To find out where to buy gold and silver reliably at great prices, go get your free Financial Survival Toolkit at financialsurvivalnetwork.com. You'll also get our complimentary newsletter. This is the Financial Survival Network.
1490 WGCH. This is Kerry Lutz, and you're listening to the Financial Survival Network, which is brought to you by Miles Franklin. They've been in business selling gold and silver for over 20 years, and I'm a customer because when you buy, they ship. For more information, find them on the web at milesfranklin.com or give them a call at 800-822-8080 and get a free quote. Today, we're going to explore whether there's a moral case for capitalism and a moral case against socialism, and which system really advances the common good. And can you be free in a society where there's an absence of a free market economy? Father Robert A. Sirico has written a book, Defending the Free Market, The Moral Case for a Free Economy, in which he answers these questions and a lot more than we have time for today. Father Sirico, welcome to the Financial Survival Network.
Very good to be with you. Thanks for having me.
I saw you interviewed on a show, don't remember which one. I heard the book. I immediately downloaded it from Amazon. I've been reading it. And
Thank you. The fact that somebody would take several hours to read is an honor.
There is a higher good that we all should be striving for, and I feel like your book was unique in that it actually made a moral case for why capitalism functions best and why it should be the preferred system. I guess until we're all willing to work for the benefit of others selflessly, which there's nothing wrong with. I just don't believe humanity's there yet. Father Sirico, the book, Defending the Free Market, The Moral Case for a Free Economy. Did you wake up one day and decide you were going to write this book? How did you come to this?
No, somebody asked me how long it took to write the book. I said, over 22 years, in the sense that it really, and in the book, I try to present it in this way. It traces my own experience of having been on the left in California. This was while I was away from my faith, long before I was a priest. The initial conversion, which was based on utilitarian arguments for the free society, when I read books by Milton Friedman and Hayek and Bastiat and Mises and others. And then, having been converted politically, came back to the faith that I had been raised in, went on to seminary. I wrote the book largely because I think there are a lot of, especially religious people, who don't appreciate the moral potential of what a market economy offers to society and don't think deeply enough about who human beings are and our very nature oriented toward freedom. We accomplish and become what we're supposed to be in the context of freedom.
We have stereotypes, and we'll get to them, but from your standpoint, what makes capitalism the most moral economic system that man has thus far developed?
Well, let me just add a little nuance to that for the sake of precision. I don't think that capitalism as such can be said to be a moral system. It's only the morality that people bring to the context of freedom. In other words, I would say the same thing about freedom. Freedom isn't moral, and it isn't immoral. It's a vacuum. It's the context in which either morality or vice can be made real. And so the free market will offer as many goods and services as free people in their free acting will do in their actions with one another, because that's what the free market is. So it permits the greatest scope of moral decision-making, because morality is predicated on volition, on free choice. And the other systems, varying forms of collectivism, coerce that. They coerce the conscience of man. They inhibit human productivity and flourishing. And these, in that sense, can be deemed to be immoral and fostering vices.
So the system itself is neither moral or immoral. It's the people participating in it that determine
Exactly.
the morality.
Yeah, there is no capitalism without people.
Sure. But yet we're all taught from a young age in various religions that we are our brother's keeper. First, what does that mean exactly? And second, if we are our brother's keeper, then isn't it proper for the government to make us pay up for that privilege?
Well, when we say that we're our brother's keeper, this, of course, comes from the book of Genesis, where a Cain kills Abel, and God says, "Where's your brother?" And he says, "I'm not my brother's keeper." I don't, well, he had just killed him. I think what it means, basically, is this recognition of ourselves in other people, that we are a common species, that there's something unique about who we are, and that when we see people in distress, I think only the coldest and hardest of human hearts doesn't have some kind of sympathy and concern for that distress that the other person is in. This is what I understand human solidarity to be. And the reason the government doesn't have a role in that fulfilling it is because the government can't. The government doesn't feel, it doesn't think. The state is an abstraction. It is, to the extent that it's legitimate, it exists for the purpose of ensuring human liberty. That's the political end of man is freedom, as Lord Acton once said. So to presume that the state has the responsibility to do everything that human beings have the responsibility to do is to advocate, first of all, a diminishment of humanity, and secondly, to advocate totalitarianism.
But the statists among us will always come back and say, well, the private sector won't do it. Individuals will not do it. It's a problem. The state needs to solve it. And there is, in Western societies today, an overwhelming belief in the ability and the legitimacy of the state to undertake the solution of anything that it perceives to be a problem and go about solving it, which leads to all sorts of mischief, doesn't it?
Well, it does. And, you describe it very benignly. You describe it almost as though people sit around and are waiting for something good to happen, and they say nobody's doing it, and so we'll have to get the state to do it. In point of fact, what happens is people sit around in the Capitol and say, we've got to find something to do. What should we do? And there's this whole process of lobbying and buying constituencies, offering favors. And this whole mechanism comes into play. So sometimes they'll co-opt something that's basically good, that's emerging in society, and they'll kind of run out in front of the revolution and lead the crowd as though they were the ones who were animating. I think of the civil rights movement as an example of that. The early civil rights movement was not a political, governmental movement. It was a social movement, a moral movement, largely on the part of religious people who protested. And the early protests of the civil rights movement were freely chosen boycotts and protests against racial injustice. Now, the government gets in the act, and it becomes a whole different kind of thing. So I think that the notion that the government has to be involved in things that are good is a misnomer. If things are really needed, then there are enough people to determine. Remember, these actions don't have to be taken by individuals. In fact, most of the actions taken in the market are not actions taken by individuals. They're actions of voluntary cooperation between people who have mutual interests.
And that leads us to the next point, which you kind of touched upon. People, the most wealthy among society, before we had a paternalistic government, they built huge charitable institutions aimed at achieving many of the goals that we associate with government today. And I'll just name Andrew Carnegie, setting up libraries, helping fund them all over the country, and other foundations that are out there.
Well, let's even think back even further. The institution of the hospital. It didn't come out of government. It came out of religious concern for the sick and the poor. The whole institution of charity as an institution emerged from Christianity, and international charity as an institution emerged from Christian sensibility about the needs of other people and the kind of universal scope of the church's mission, not to minister to people because they were of our religion, but because we believe in doing that. So the university, likewise, all of these things came into existence by moral inspiration and by private initiative. Then they get co-opted by the government.
Exactly the point. And you go back to Ben Franklin, so many of the institutions in Philadelphia, they get developed privately, and then somehow humanity makes it a governmental priority to furnish these services, and then invariably the quality of the services diminish and the cost of them go up, because that's the way government operates regardless, right?
Well, let's ask ourselves why that happens. Why do costs go up? Why does quality go down? There's a very simple answer. Hayek called it in his last book, the fatal conceit. It's the presumption that there exists one group of people, what we would call, I think Hayek called it a synoptic delusion, the one-eyed presumption that we can see everything and know everything that society needs and wants, and we can organize the forces of society to meet those needs. And that's just an illusion. It's a fake conceit, because the information that tells us what people need comes to us through voluntary actions that people take in a market. And when the market is distorted, when the price system is distorted, when the monetary system is distorted by excessive taxes or inflationary policies or trade restrictions and barriers and all of the things, then what ends up happening is all of that knowledge gets distorted. And that's where you get waste. That's where you get the bureaucratization, where people are no longer concerned about the services that they're providing, but the constituencies that they're serving and the political machinations that go into that.
Couldn't have said it better myself. And that's one of the biggest arguments for the free market, is all of that pricing data in a free market gives information to the participants. Right. And when it's controlled by the government, that information is devoid.
What is reality?
What's
it dumbs society down.
Yeah. What's the true value of a home right now? And that is always a function of the mortgage market, whether there should be a mortgage market or not. Sure. If there was no mortgage market, then the prices would be much lower. Same thing with college education. If there were no student loans, how much would a year of college cost?
Right.
I go back to my sister in 1965, went to Douglas College in New Jersey, State College, excellent school at the time. And the tuition, room and board, was $1,200 per year. Now, granted, it was a state school, so maybe it was $3,000 at Harvard or Yale. And if we look at how much the price of a college education has gone up, it's almost all attributable to the easy money student loan bandwagon, right?
Yeah, it's a horrible situation that renders people vulnerable.
Renders them vulnerable and dependent upon the government, for which they give up their freedoms, right?
Right. They vote for people. This is the whole kind of loop. Then politicians come to constituencies, say, of students, and say, vote for me and I'll get you these student loans at lower interest rates, without regard to what that does to the economy as a whole.
I had on Walter Williams, well-known economist from George Mason University.
Good friend. Good friend.
Yeah, great guy. I've been a fan of his for I can't tell you how many years. And he said, if I wanted to run for Senate, and my platform was, I'm going to return the country to a constitutional republic, and you're not going to get those goodies. You're not going to get the free health care that's paid for by the rest of us, and the free education and all that. There's no possible way that he could be elected. So how do we turn this around?
Unless people understand that it's not that they're going to have their health care taken away from them, or their food taken away from them, or their homes taken away from them. If they come to understand the way in which we attain the things we need is more secure in a free market than it will be in the governmental system. People ask me, do you believe in universal health care? And my response is, yes, of course I believe in universal health care, the same way I believe in universal clothing and universal food. And what has provided clothing? What has provided food for us? It's been the market. And I think if we had a market in healthcare, we would know the real costs. We would be able to ration the costs the way we do when we buy food. When we go into a supermarket, we see the prices of the things, and we compare, shop, and we go to different places for sales and things like that. If you go into a doctor's office, you and I don't even know what the procedure is going to cost. What does that office visit cost? What does his competitor charge for the same procedure, the same office visit? And what we're doing is we're flying blind here. And when we're flying blind, if we were in a grocery store, we were told, well, you're not going to pay for it. Somebody else is going to pay for it. Well, you go for the porterhouse,
Yeah, that's so true. And I was reading an article that the Amish actually comparison shop for medical procedures. They figure out what they cost, and they negotiate for discounts and things like that. That this is from a bygone era. I mean, when I was a kid, the doctor came to the house. I think it was $10 or $15 a month. Not that old. And if my mother didn't have 15, say, look, I'll give you 10 now, and next time I see you, I'll give you another 5. Right. And that was how it worked. So let's return back to your background, though. You're in the clergy. And your view, I would assume, in the church is a minority view, isn't it?
It's growing. There are, certainly people who have much greater sympathy to these ideas. Our work is with Catholic and non-Catholic, by the way. If you're talking about within the Catholic Church, the younger priests coming out now are far more open to these kinds of ideas. I noticed that at the Bishops' Conference at a recent debate, a number of these kinds of ideas were brought to the floor on the part of bishops. So I think, the debate is shifting, which is what we set out to do 22 years ago when we founded the Acton Institute.
And that's what I'm doing here, interviewing you.
Yes, sure.
We both want to see a true debate and an exchange of ideas rather than a default that the government should do it or the individual isn't responsible. And that's where the argument ends. And do you find that distressing that we never had a discussion about going off the gold standard or going on to the fiat money standard or expanding the welfare state? I guess there was a little bit of a debate over Medicare, but pretty much it just goes.
Yeah, it does. And I think it does that because of some of the reasons you've already identified. That is, you can build constituencies much more easily, and you can kind of have these deals going on in the halls of Congress that a lot of people don't even know about. When you can pass so complicated and extensive a piece of legislation as the Patients' Care Act that was passed recently and is now being debated. You remember what at the time Speaker Pelosi said, we have to pass the bill before we can know what's in it.
Yeah, you got to pass it to read it.
Yeah, this is insane. Yeah. It's simply insane and dangerous. So yes, I do find it frustrating, and which is why I began an institution, why I've written a book that tries to get the debate out into the public square. And I can say that, we're being successful at that.
Yeah, I think so too, especially among the younger people. When you see a Ron Paul gather the amount of interest and discussion and enthusiasm, it definitely gives you hope. I'm just concerned that it's all going to collapse before we get to the point where there's a consensus to do something about it.
Well, this was Hayek's worry in his essay on the intellectuals and socialism. He wonders at the end of that essay, or maybe it was his Nobel laureate speech, where he says, is the free society doomed to fail because people don't understand its simplicity? And he says, I hope not. What we need is a radical alternative to the way people think now. And we've been trying to present that in a winsome way, in a reasonable way, without regard to people's religious tradition. We're not as such a religious organization. We do economic and moral education from a variety of perspectives.
And really, it really is an imperative, because the morality of the free market and its ability to provide for everybody's basic needs, nobody has ever come up with anything better. There's no better system out there. And if we want to go on advancing as a civilization so we can worry about other issues, we've got to get that part right.
Right. I think that's very true. It's very true.
The Acton Institute, I assume it's named after Lord Acton?
That's right, who said power tends to corrupt and absolute power corrupts absolutely. He also said that liberty is the delicate fruit of a mature civilization. That this gift of liberty that we've inherited is very delicate, and it's come to us through a whole refinement process where our ancestors considered these things and debated them. I think in particular the founding fathers of the United States really understood the temptation to power on the part of politicians, which is why they divided government.
Exactly. Father, it's really been a pleasure speaking with you about this. And I think the more voices that are heard, and that's my personal mission, is to interview anybody who wants to talk about freedom. I'll even interview the other side, but they don't seem to want to have a debate very often about it. But I want more and more voices, because the more voices people hear from different sources, the better the chances are that they'll come to an understanding that what we have now is just the worst of all possible, or getting towards the worst of all possible solutions. Yeah. So
no, it's been fun being with you. Thank you for having me, Kerry.
Pleasure. So it's acton.org, right? ACTON.org.
Right. And the book you mentioned is on Amazon.
Right. Yeah, and a great book. And after I'm done reading it, we'll call you back, because there's a couple of other issues I want to discuss, but I want to get your viewpoint first.
Give a call.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Take care.